So I have a whole bunch of books to talk about. Hey there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to talk to you about some of the novels I have on my shelf that are considered epistolary. Epistolary is when the book is written in mainly the format of a letter or a journal or a diary entry, maybe some newspaper clippings. I think today they do like emails. There might be some with emails, that kind of thing. So it's in a different format than your normal just narrative of someone telling a story, and I find them to be really interesting. I do enjoy a good epistolary because when you're reading someone's letters, it just feels more personal and more intimate, and you feel like you're learning secrets and that kind of thing. So I think that's why I like the format. I also like it because it feels like it's a quicker read. When you're reading these letters, normally they're not that long, and so you feel like you're getting somewhere a lot quicker because they're these short little excerpts as you go, and I just find that to be a fun way to read a book. So I'm going to talk to you about a lot of the books that I have on my shelf that are epistolary that I've enjoyed. The reason that I'm even doing this is last week I read a book called The Last Lifeboat by Hazel Gaynor, and if you didn't see that, I'll leave a link to, I didn't do a book review, but I talk about the book in my last reading update. But this book I picked up because it was, I pre-ordered it. It was a new book, a new release this year, and I wanted to read it because I had read another book by Hazel Gaynor earlier, and it was epistolary, and I enjoyed it so much that I wanted to try something else by this author. This one is written like a journal form. Each chapter is, it's like the date, I think it comes out, it says London, September 20th, 1940, like that. And then throughout it, there's also some newspaper clippings. So I liked that format for this book, and I really enjoyed that about it. This was not my favorite book, but it reminded me of how much I do like the epistolary format. So I'm just going to go through, what I did was I just pulled books from my shelf that are epistolary so that we could kind of talk about these. If you haven't read them, I'm going to try to talk you into reading some of these. And I also, before I forget, want to know if there are some that I don't mention that you think I would enjoy too, because I'm always looking for more epistolary form type novels. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So the first one I want to mention is Lady Susan by Jane Austen. We just had Jane Austen July, and I think a lot of people was reading Lady Susan during Jane Austen July. It is a novella. It's not a full-length novel, but I love it. Not everybody loves her juvenilia or her novellas and short stories and things. And I don't love most of her juvenilia, but I do enjoy Lady Susan, and I do love it because it's epistolary. It is about Lady Susan, who is pretty much a manipulator, and you learn how she is manipulating people through these letters. The whole thing is a bunch of letters, and I really enjoy it for that. Again, it's a novella, so it's not that long, but I highly recommend Lady Susan. The next one I want to mention is Dracula. I loved this book, and I don't read horror really, but it's considered a gothic horror. This is Victorian. If you want to read it for Victober, that would be a perfect time to read this one. I found this to be interesting because it's written in epistolary form. This is written in newspaper clippings, letters, all kinds of documents to show Dracula infiltrating into England and how he's going to try to take over, basically, as a vampire. So I found it to be interesting for that reason. I did not know, I knew of Dracula, of course, from TV, and, the icon of who we say Dracula is, the stereotype of that, but I really didn't know anything about how this story was told or the details of this story until I read it as an adult, and I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed this. I think this is a great book for book groups and discussions. Both of my boys, I think, read this when they were in high school. I think it was assigned, and they had great discussions about it. And that's why I ended up picking it up. When one of the boys was reading it in high school, I picked it up, and I was surprised at how much I did enjoy it. And again, I think I did enjoy it by the way that it's told in that format of, you know, documents and letters and things. So I do recommend Dracula. Now, I did roll my eyes at the way the women are portrayed in this, because that is a little, they are helpless. But I was like, okay, I'll chalk it up for the time it was written and move on. But I do recommend Dracula. The next one is very similar. It's another considered gothic horror, and that is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I was even more surprised by this one than I was Dracula. This was like a 5-star fantastic read for me, and it's one of the most memorable books I've read, one of the most surprising books I've read, because again, just like Dracula, I had my assumptions about Frankenstein, and this is nothing like I thought Frankenstein was. It is nothing like that at all, and so I was surprised by that. This is told, there's a man writing letters to his sister about Frankenstein, and so those are sprinkled throughout, so that's why I'm calling this epistolary. Not all of it is that way, but there are a lot of letters of this brother writing to his sister about the story of Frankenstein. And for me, this book is so thought-provoking. It is one of those books. Now, it is, it was before Victorian, actually. When was this written? Let me check. This was written in 1818, so it's before the Victorian period. But it reads like a Victorian work, because that's not too much earlier than the Victorian period. I just found it to be such a great book to discuss with other people, and so I really need to do a group read of this so that we can talk about it, because as I was reading it, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be discussing this with other people, because it just talks about humanity in this way of how we are responsible for our actions, and that when we do things, we need to take responsibility for that. That's the main thing that I took away from this book. I highly recommend Frankenstein, and I think this needs to be a buddy read or a group read for you if you pick it up. So try to find someone to read this one with you so you can talk about it along the way. Another wonderful classic is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. This book is underrated. I mean, we hear all about Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre by the Bronte sisters. Well, Anne Bronte's The Tenant of Wildfell Hall is right up there with those books too. I think this is just as good as those books. This book is epistolary because it's told in letters and diary entries, and it's about this woman Helen, and you learn about Helen through these letters and diary entries. You learn about Helen's abusive marriage and how she escapes this abusive relationship. This one is one, again, like Frankenstein, where you need to read this with someone else. So this is a great book for a buddy read or a book club or something like that, and you would get so much more out of it, I think, if you read this with someone else, because there are so many issues on every page. There's a lot about child rearing, a lot about the consequences of how you raise your children, and how the men were being raised, how the boys were being raised in this story is a big part of it. Of course, spousal abuse and during the Victorian period, just the women in general, and that they didn't have the rights that the men had, and those kind of things. All of that, social justices, all of those kind of things are discussed in this book. And it is done wonderfully. Anne Bronte did a great job with conveying her messages, many messages in the story. And it's just an interesting story too. It's a great read. But also, Helen is a wonderful character. She is a strong female character that I really enjoyed reading about. So I highly recommend The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. And this would be great for Victober if you haven't read it. So the next one is another Victorian classic, and that is The Diary of a Nobody. But this one is nothing like The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. This one is hilarious. It's lighthearted. It's not that long. And it is just these diary entries of Mr. Pooter. And it is so funny because On the back of this book, it kind of summarizes it. It says, I fail to see, because I do not happen to be a somebody, why my diary should not be interesting. And so he goes about his day, and he's just trying to, be content in his everyday normal life. But things just happen to him along the way, and it's just really a funny book. I actually found this beautiful copy of it at an estate sale, this cloth bound. It came in a little slip case, and I love this little copy. And when I see this book, I laugh out loud because it is just hilarious. So this is a different type of epistolary, but it's a lot of fun. The next one I want to mention is a modern classic, and that is the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. I need to pick up another copy of that because I want to buddy read that with my son. He wants to read it, and so I need to pick up a copy of that one. But this one is one I highly recommend. It is letters written by Screwtape, who is the senior demon, and he's writing to his nephew Wormwood on how to pretty much destroy a person, how to send them down the wrong path, how to manipulate them into, deceiving them into destruction. And it is super interesting. I highly recommend it. Again, it's a great one for discussion, and I plan on reading that, buddy reading that with my son soon. I need to pick up another copy, but that's a great one for letter writing, to epistolary too, because it's letters written from this Screwtape to his nephew Wormwood, sort of instructing him on how to destroy this person's life, and it's super interesting. Now the next one is a modern classic, and that is The Color Purple by Alice Walker. I read this in college, and then later on I read it again because I was doing this study of Southern literature, so I needed to read it again. This is a great example of an epistolary novel because the letters are written by Celie, the main character in the story, who is an African-American woman really struggling to survive in this rural area in Georgia. And it is a very tough read. This was not one for the weak-hearted. This deals with incest and rape and spousal abuse and just degrading women in all sorts of ways and treating women as property. So I'm just warning you that this is not a fuzzy feel-good book. It is very hard to read, but it is a great example of an epistolary novel. The way that she tells the story, you feel for Celie in such a way. And I think we connect with Celie so much deeper because she's telling it in that letter format. But I am warning you that if those things, you don't want to read about those kind of things, then don't pick this one up because it was a hard read. Again, I read this in college. It was an assignment in college, and then I had to reread it for something else on the study of Southern literature. So I've read it twice, but I do think that it's a masterpiece of a book, and I think it won the Pulitzer Prize, and I can see why. The next one is one with a long title, The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Society. This one is great. They made a movie of this one. You've probably read it because it's super popular. It reminds me of 84 Charing Cross Road. Now this is a true story, so I didn't count this because I'm doing novels, but this is very similar to 84 Charing Cross Road in that in this story, even though it's fiction, they build a relationship through letter writing. So they write letters and they just continue and until she goes and meets everyone after she's written these letters. Fantastic. I highly recommend this one if you haven't had a chance to read it. The one that started this whole epistolary novel video is Last Christmas in Paris by Hazel Gaynor and Heather Webb. I read this last Christmas and I loved it so much that I wanted to read more Hazel Gaynor. So when I saw that she was coming out with The Last Lifeboat, I picked it up, and here we are talking about epistolary novels. This one to me is better than The Last Lifeboat. It is all completely letters, short little letters too. Some are long, some are short. Letters, newspaper articles, journal entries, telegrams. That's all this is. It's completely that. I think there might be one small, maybe a couple of pages of paragraphs of narration. The rest is completely epistolary. So this is a great example of a great book that is an epistolary novel, I highly recommend this one too. Maybe you could pick this up at Christmas. So this is a young adult book, Book of 1,000 Days. There's a whole series of these, and they're kind of like fairy tale, folk tale retellings. In this one, the girl and her lady's maid are locked away in a tower. And so it's her days spending in this tower. So she goes through day 1, this happens. Day 55, this happens. Now, she doesn't do all 1,000 days journal entries, but you're counting down as she goes through the days locked in this tower. I loved it. I'm not a big young adult reader. I don't have a lot of young adult on my shelf, but I kept this one because I enjoyed it so much. So I highly recommend that one. The next one is a Newbery Award winner, and it's by Beverly Cleary, and it's called Dear Mr. Henshaw. Now, I will say this is not lighthearted, funny, just a fun little middle grade book like Beverly Cleary's Clickatat Street. Clickatat Street is her Ramona Quimby books and Henry Huggins and all of those. This is nothing like that. This is more serious, but it's about a young boy named Lee who is assigned in his classroom to write letters to someone. So he starts writing letters to a favorite author, an author that's written these books that he really enjoyed. So he starts writing letters to this author as an assignment in his classroom. And as you read the letters, you learn more and more about the struggles that Lee, this young boy, is having in his life. And so you learn about, the highs and lows of his life as you go through the story. I highly recommend this one, and I thought it was a great Newbery winner. And then finally, I had to mention this one because when I was in middle school, I can see where it was in the middle school library. I checked this book out so many times. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume. And I don't know how many times I read this as a child. Now, the whole thing's not epistolary. What happens is Margaret talks to God. At the beginning of most chapters, it's, Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. We're moving today. I'm so scared, God. I've never lived anywhere but here. Suppose I hate my new school. Suppose everybody there hates me. Please help me, God. Don't let New Jersey be too horrible. Thank you. And through it, she asks God all kinds of questions, and she has these conversations with God about faith and growing up. It's a coming of age type story and moving to a new place. And just like every other girl during that time, I loved it and I connected with Margaret. This is just one of those books that I will always remember reading as a comfort for me when I was in middle school. I don't know why, but we all felt that way. We loved Judy Blume at the time. Beverly Cleary and Judy Blume were the writers for us, and so I had to mention this one. A couple of you have mentioned that there's a movie adaptation. I haven't seen that. Let me know if you've seen that in the comments. So those are some epistolary novels that I've enjoyed that are on my shelf. Have you read any of these? Let me know in the comments, and let me know too if there's one I didn't mention that you think I should read next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.